I see Paul Gilbert and Chris Gouldell. Is that on? My apologies. I think I've just mangled your name terribly, sir. Are you here with someone else, Chris?
Kia ora. No, I'm not this morning. Paul Gilbert is detained at another meeting.
Right. No, that's fine. Hey, thank you so much for making a submission and coming to talk with us today. We have 15 minutes with you. Please take your submission as being read. Really appreciate you making a submission to us as an organisation, and we're in your hands. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you very much. And again, I'm Chris Gouldell, the Deputy Chief Executive with Community Housing Aotearoa, and we're a peak body for community housing providers and are a incorporated society and a registered charity. We also have a wholly owned subsidiary company which engages in housing studies, research, and support to further our charitable mission. And so we're very familiar with a lot of the issues that are raised under the proposed bill, and are bringing that perspective along with the perspective of our members. So we have about 75 provider members. Nearly all of those are registered charities also. One notable outlier is the Queenstown Lakes Community Housing Trust, which many of you will be familiar, was deregistered for trying to end poverty in families by providing pathways into home ownership. And I joined our organization shortly after that had occurred, and spent substantial time working with Charity Services, working with our members to better clarify Charity Services' approach to home ownership and dealing with the legal and tax consequences that came from that decision, and continue to prevent that charitable trust that trust now from achieving charitable status. I've also been a member of the Charity Sector User Group since 2017, and have enjoyed that opportunity along with partners in the charitable and community sector to engage directly with Charity Services. And many of the issues that are in our submission are things that we've raised continually and are still advocating to see incorporated into the current bill. And I guess at the high level, what we're seeking is really for an independent review of the Charities Act. Our members and we see concerns with how the definition of charity is being interpreted, and we don't see that being addressed through this bill. We find that the current court process of judgments defining that charitable purpose, grounded in the case law, is just flawed. And it's not keeping up with modern times and modern conditions. And so we really think that this needs to be taken back to first principles and have a full review. And we believe that's probably best done through an independent body such as the Law Commission to really dig into this with expertise, address the underlying issues, and ensure we've got a great platform for supporting charitable activities and charitable organizations into the future. And so that's the main part. We do see some things in here that we do like. We like the reduction in the reporting requirements for small charities. We think that's more proportionate to their skills, abilities, and actually any concerns about their work. We continue to have some concerns around the regulatory decision-making and appeals process. We do see the proposal for the Taxation Review Authority as a step forward, but would really like to ensure that that process incorporates the ability to appeal all decisions and to have an oral hearing of evidence, so that charities are able to really bring forward the information and give a clear picture at that process. And I'll take the opportunity to stop here and answer any specific questions that members may have and respond to those.
Thank you, Chris. A good submission. Look, I just have a question. You talk about wanting the ability to appeal all decisions, not just the registration and deregistration matter. Do you want to just talk a little bit about how you've come to that, and also I guess the matter for us is what kind of compliance do you think, or how much work, what kind of workload might that possibly bring?
I don't think it will be a huge increase in workload, but I think currently, because it's just a binary system, we don't know exactly. And in terms of reviewing to that, I defer to some of the work that was done by Sue Barker with Charities Law and her substantial review of international best practice in this space and some of the recommendations that she put forward there. But we do see, and I know personally from working with our members, that charity services during the time that they were reviewing housing activities, went through individual organizations' trust deeds and basically required them to make amendments to those trust deeds, or face deregistration. And so there wasn't a deregistration that was done at that point, but they were being instructed to do certain things and really didn't have a process to say, no, let's have a further discussion and a way to have that independently reviewed.
That's useful, thank you. And so your view around the annual review of policies and procedures, would your thoughts on that?
We think it's going to turn into more of a tick box exercise. If organizations are active and the governance already has responsibilities in that space. As an incorporated society, our members hold us to account to make sure that, we're keeping ahead. There are already obligations on officers to do certain things. And by having a formal requirement to show that, I think, again, is just trying to over-regulate in this space and could potentially catch people out. Because they haven't documented that process, rather than are they actually complying with legislation and keeping up to date with their rules and their operations.
So I will pass to Maureen shortly, but one final question. So with this annual review process, for a large or well-resourced charity, with a strong governance board, I think, they know the rules around looking at policies. But for our many of our smaller charities who, they might get together very infrequently, they're probably never going to go there. Do you, would you see some value in some of the perhaps tier 4s having an annual, whereas some of the bigger ones, that's a work program that we know they're already incorporating? Or could you suggest a 5-year term, or is there some other thoughts that you have around that?
Certainly an extension to a longer term would be more reasonable. And I also think when you look especially at those tier 4 charities, so these are charities, I believe, under 100,000, 125,000 of annual revenue. Most of them are actually much smaller than that. Is that the best use of their time? And what is the risk posed if they haven't? If it's a small, community organization that's promoting, the environment or something and doing something very locally, is there really a large risk if there are no staff, no employees to their operations and very little money flowing through that organization? So I think it is really that balance of risk versus benefit.
That's very thoughtful, thank you. I'll move now to Maureen.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Thanks very much, Chris, for coming on today. One of the other issues raised in your written submission is around the now expanded definition of an officer, and how how that could mean, or how that could be interpreted. Because when you use words like significant, it does become quite subjective. So I wonder if you have any other suggestions for us and how that could be reframed.
On the technical wording, I would refer to the experts in that. And again, I've worked with Sue Barker for years. She was a strong supporter of our organization and the work that we did to support our members at the time that Charities Services was reviewing the charitable status of ownership organizations. And I think she has a strong technical understanding of that issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, have I got time for another one? Thank you. The other issue raised in your written submission is around the process of charitable purpose being defined by the courts, and we've heard many submissions talk to this. What would you suggest is a way forward in from a select committee point of view in ensuring that is protected in the future?
It's a difficult one, but I think as we stated in the submission, we really think a first principles review of our approach to charities and what is charitable. So we have the four heads of charity. Our member organizations typically fall under the relief of poverty, and in that space, poverty has changed over time. This act is grounded in, I believe, the 1604 Act of Elizabeth. It's an entirely different world that we live in and operate in. And I think as our members try to not service poverty, but to end poverty through home ownership, which is a proven way to do that, they face barriers. And as I've met with organizations that are looking at the housing crisis around them and are trying to set up charitable trusts to respond in their local communities to 30 years of declining home ownership, and especially in Maori and Pacifica communities. And when they put that word ownership into their applications, they face a longer and more arduous process of securing registration and often being told to amend their trust deeds and to limit the activities in which they engage, which they, as on the ground local organizations, feel are needed to respond within their community, not to service poverty, but to end poverty.
Yeah, excellent answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. A really good submission, and you've answered our questions very well and thoroughly. So really appreciate the work that you not only do in the community, but for coming to speak with us today. With that, have a good rest of your day. Thank you.